Production funding for Ruckus has been provided by gifts from Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Fred and Lou Hartwig family, Peter and Barbara Gattermeyer, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize, and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly, and our topics this week count on counties for consistent controversy, a raucous caucus debate in Kansas, and the lingering debate over guns and violence in Kansas City and throughout America, plus, of course, roast and toast. But we start with our Newsmaker segment and talk with Eric Rogers of Bike Walk KC. Last week's panel weighed in on the idea of adding bike lanes to Kansas City streets, and there did not seem to be strong support. Of course, there are many people who do like the concept of bike lanes and see them as a beneficial addition to Kansas City. And certainly Eric Rogers, Executive Director of Bike Walk KC, is one of them, and he will now tell us why, I hope. Mr. Rogers? How's your neighborhood, Mr. Rogers?
It's great.
Eric, welcome to Ruckus. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
If someone knows nothing about your organization, Bike Walk KC, what can you tell them in a few seconds that would describe it?
We are a local small nonprofit that works to make it safer and more comfortable and easier to get around the city and however you want to, whether it's walking, biking, using public transit. We work in dozens of elementary schools across the region to educate kids. We work with public policymakers in local city halls, and we do a variety of activities to build community and really help redefine our streets as places for people to build a culture of active living.
When you say bike, is that all inclusive for two-wheeled vehicles?
Yes. It could be a bike, it could be a tricycle if you're an older person. We talk about scooters now, really anything that is a different way of getting around.
And I think your organization wants the City Council to adopt what is being called a master bike plan. Mm-hmm. What is the essence of it? How is it described?
So the bike plan is really the result of a performance audit that the city auditor did a couple years ago and found that the city's entire approach to mobility issues was broken and we needed to start over. And so now we have this new plan that has been drafted, and it sets out a vision of what things could look like in 30 years. It has a network of what are called low-stress bike routes. So places you can bike to get from your home, say, to work or the grocery store or school, and have a place where you are safe, protected from cars, and you feel comfortable getting there.
So you see bikes as something more than you use for recreational purposes?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's on the increase. So we know from the census data that here in Kansas City, biking to work in particular has gone up 20% since the 90s, and it's actually gone up 130% since just 2016.
Do you know what that would mean in terms of people, what the number would be?
Oh, I was told there'd be no math here, Mike,
but
I'm sure the viewers can do math on their own. But
so
it is a growing
you don't
segment
know
of
how
people,
many.
And in many parts of the community, it's a very large segment. So there are parts of downtown, the west side, historic northeast, and the east side, where it could be up to 10 or 15% of people are walking and biking. And these are especially neighborhoods where more than half of households may not have access to a car. So we're talking about very vulnerable populations who really have no other way to get to work or school than walking, biking, or transit. And so those are really the folks that we try to focus on and support.
Well, there are some news reports that say the cost of the master plan would be $400 million to implement. You've pushed back on that, I think.
Absolutely.
Let me quote from your website. The estimated cost of the plan ranges from $387 million to $418 million, but this price tag must be placed in the proper context. What is the proper context?
Yeah, so the bike plan actually provided a range of prices from somewhere around $150 million up to $400 million. And that price was really only if we would go out and overnight rebuild all of the streets from the ground up to add in bike lanes. And of course, we're never gonna do that. We can see from a lot of other cities, places around us like St. Louis, Omaha, Wichita, where they do it much less expensively, by doing things like incorporating bike lanes when you do the normal repaving of a street. And so the actual price we see around the country is much, much lower.
And if somebody wants to know more about the plan and about your organization, you have a website?
Yeah, our website is bikewalkkc.org.
And one final quick question. I know a lot of the focus is on Kansas City, Missouri, but what about other parts of the metro area?
Other parts of the metro area are really embracing alternative transportation for the health benefits, especially economic benefits. We know that folks that arrive at a business walking or biking are likely to visit more often, spend more money. A lot of places around the country that put in bike lanes see business sales tax receipts go up. So a city like Overland Park is really probably at the forefront in our region. They're adding something like 20 or 30 miles of bike routes every year.
So your group is metro-wide?
We are metro-wide. We work in elementary schools on both sides of the state line. We work in city halls all over the region.
All right, thanks very much for coming in. Sorry about the math question. We'll exclude that next time. All right,
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That is Eric Rogers. He is Executive Director of Bike Walk KC. Now let's meet the panel and start a ruckus. Alana Rately is a former Kansas GOP official and now Executive Director of the 19th Amendment Centennial. Arthur Benson is a longtime and prominent Kansas City attorney. Teresa Garza is a former Jackson County legislator. And Ron Freeman is a motivational speaker and writer. Welcome to all of you. Thanks very much for coming in. A lot to talk about today. Generally, we don't hear a lot of news about Clay County's government. But in the last few months we have, and the news is not good. An apparent political battle between two of the three county commissioners and the sheriff has resulted in the commission cutting $1 million from the sheriff's budget. The cuts have caused serious problems affecting jailhouse food and health care. A judge ordered the money restored, but two of the commissioners appealed the judgment. Earlier in the year, the state began an audit of the county's finances, the result of a petition campaign signed by 9,000 Clay County residents. Clay is not the only county with a controversial government. Think of Jackson County, for example. But let's start with this. Is there something unique about county governments that leads to controversy? And you were part of the Jackson County legislature once, Teresa, so what is your answer to that?
Thank you for pointing that out.
My pleasure.
I think that county governments tend to kind of fly under the radar. They work in the dark. Not a lot of people pay attention to them because they don't really know what they do. And although there's a lot that they actually handle, such as all of the property tax assessments and things like that, those important things, especially what have been in the news lately, they also, Jackson County particularly, has one of the largest county park systems in the nation. They're like in the top 5. So there's a lot that actually they oversee, including the court systems here in Jackson County for the circuit courts. But people just don't realize that, so they tend to fly under the radar, and nobody really pays much attention.
Do we see these same problems in other metro counties beyond Jackson and Clay?
Oh, I think you see the problems, but they get highlighted when something controversial happens. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the counties, you see Johnson County, Missouri, or Platte County, they don't get in the news because nothing's really significant going on right there. But when you get somebody where typically somebody gets petty, and we've seen that in Jackson County, now it's going on in Clay, you see these wars escalate and stuff comes to the surface.
You mentioned the property tax problem in Jackson County, and Art, that is a serious problem. A lot of people believe they have been overtaxed, or at least the estimates are far beyond what they should be. Thousands of people have appealed, and thus far it appears the county has no solution.
No, but the courts will. There are a number of plaintiffs that are ready to file a lawsuit, but they cannot file until they've exhausted their administrative remedies, which means appealing through the Board of Adjustment for the county and then appealing to the State Tax Commission. The timing of those appeals may mean that erroneous tax bills will be sent out on the erroneous assessments by the end of this year. There is some hope that the Tax Commission can start churning out some exhaustion plaintiffs, and a lawsuit can be filed in early December, and maybe a preliminary injunction will prevent the mistaxation of Jackson Countyans.
Alana, I wonder, are there too many overlapping functions between city and county governments? Seems like they do a lot of the same things.
You know, they do overlap, but it kind of is it's specific to different counties and cities. So, for instance, you're talking about the parks and recreation. I see a lot of overlap with that. Just, you know, in the county where I am, my children participate in these kinds of parks and the activities that are done, and there seemed to be quite a bit of overlap there. I also think, you know, the problems that we have with property assessments and that kind of thing, definitely, those are not unique to particular counties. We have had a lot of people upset in Johnson County on the Kansas side for the same reason, and they're saying they're just getting these assessments because they want increased tax revenue.
What does this Clay County dispute, the state audit by State Auditor Nicole Galloway, do for her gubernatorial campaign? It doesn't hurt, does it?
It doesn't hurt at all, but at the same time, I think it more draws attention to Clay County and what's going on there, and then the voters and how they're going to look at that and what that carries over into any upcoming elections for anyone, and what the result is with how she alleviates that issue.
Ironically, before this program began, and after I prepared the material to talk about the counties and sent to you, there's been another county controversy in Jackson County, and it's the combat program, Teresa.
Yes.
Anti-drug, anti-crime program, millions of dollars apparently misspent.
Right. People don't like the combat tax. Basically, is a tax that is placed in Jackson County that provides for 4 different mechanisms of funding: it's prosecution, rehabilitation, treatment, and then law enforcement. And then that money gets divvied out based on, you know, the different people, the different organizations that request grant funding. And so there's actually a commission that oversees those grant requests, and then they make the recommendations.
But the audit of that shows millions of dollars have been misspent, and nothing will be done about it.
Right, and so I think it goes back to processes and procedures, checks and balances. What does that look like? How do they make sure that they're following those processes and procedures, that they're not
breaking the law?
Breaking the law, going around, finding loopholes, and figuring out how that funding is handled.
Quick final question. Do you think these controversies in county governments might be minimized if there were more news coverage of them?
You know, the way the news coverage is done today, I think it would just exacerbate it. I think, honestly, when you put those things out there, it just gets people riled up and they get baited. And so I think it would almost be worse if it was covered more. I mean, I definitely think it should be mentioned, but also mention the good things they're doing too, so it's not always such a blow up in the face of them.
Well, I hope the Clay County prisoners are getting fed and getting their health care. I mean, that is kind of shocking that is being ignored. Some news organizations are shocked that the Kansas GOP will not hold a presidential caucus in 2020. Party officials apparently believe there is no need. A Republican is president, and he's running for re-election. And there's every reason to think that Donald J. Trump will be redominated by the Republican Party, even if the Democrats ultimately begin impeachment proceedings. Not just some news organizations are irritated, so are the other 3 announced GOP presidential candidates: Bill Weld, Joe Walsh, and Mark Sanford. Kansas City Star says the party's decision not to hold a caucus is more evidence that the GOP considers voters irrelevant. So, Alana, as a Kansas Republican, how do you respond to that criticism?
Well, I think there's a lot of misinformation going around. First of all, the Kansas Republican Party does not hold a caucus for an elected Republican incumbent president. There just isn't a caucus for it. So we're not going to give special treatment to this particular president, good or bad, because other people think we should and they want a different selection. You know, and I also don't think that people realize that the way we select these people, we do it at a convention, and those are people selected to go to the national convention to vote there.
You've done that, have you not?
I have. And so, you know, I think it's misinformation. Kansas does not hold a caucus for an elected Republican incumbent president. It just doesn't happen.
But the Democrats held one in 2012, did they not, for Obama, even though Obama was president?
that's their choice.
It's a decision of the party, not the state government.
And if
right?
we are more concerned about having, going off of what's been historical precedents, we're not looking to give special treatment to anyone. And then also, this in 2012 they did that. But if we were to do that again now, it would cost the party over $250,000 that we'd rather spend on all of our candidates. And really, the manpower and the volunteer hours are exceptional. We spent so much time on this in 2016. It's very taxing to the party. And, we really want people to be out there promoting our candidates and giving good information to them.
Art, I know you're deeply concerned about GOP politics, but do you think that Weld, Walsh, and Sanford are justified in their criticism of Kansas Republicans?
Oh, I don't really have a pony in that race. The GOP can do whatever they want. The way our democratic system works is that these are party nominations, not the state of Kansas and not the state of Missouri. And so if the GOP wants to do it and call down criticism or praise on itself, that's for the GOP to decide.
How about you? Do you think these three who really have no chance to win the nomination, I suspect, do you think they're justified, though, in being irritated?
No, I mean, I agree in the sense that it is the party's choice, and the party gets to determine how they move forward when it comes to these presidential elections and these caucuses. So if that's their choice, if that's the decision that they're making, then they have the right to do that.
Ron, do you have any doubt that Trump is going to be renominated by the Republican Party?
Oh, he absolutely will be. I mean, he's running 80, especially in Kansas, 80 and 90% approval rating in Kansas. And you're also looking at a state that 92, 96, 04, and 2012 didn't hold a caucus. So it's not like this is, excuse me, it's new. The media, on the other hand, they have debates and don't allow some people to have a platform. And is that wrong? I mean, it's the same basic thing, except you're doing it with the rules of a party instead of the rules of the media. So,
speaking of debates on television, Teresa, did you happen to see the Democratic debate last week, the 3-hour spectacular?
I watched parts of it.
What was your assessment?
I mean, obviously, and I think we're going to get into this, gun control is going to be a big issue. I think every single candidate had something to talk about on that.
Let me phrase it this way.
I have my favorites. I have my non-favorites.
From a performance standpoint, who do you think prevailed in the Democratic debate?
I will say that I think a lot of people were a little disappointed in Castro's performance and his attacks towards Biden. I think if a lot of people felt that they were uncalled for or unnecessary.
He suggested he had lost his mind. He had no recollection of something he said 2 minutes before.
Which is
true.
That might be true. But I think for the most part, I think we're still a long ways off, and I think there's still some candidates that are still ahead in certain areas, and some that probably shouldn't be up there.
Alana, from your perspective in the Republican Party, and I know you don't particularly follow Democratic politics, I suspect, but do you think Biden is likely to be the nominee?
I have picked Biden from the beginning, to tell you the truth, and the reason why I believe that's really the best chance for Democrats to win. There are still a lot of moderate people on both sides that don't like Trump, even on the Republican side, but there's still a lot of moderates that would feel comfortable voting for a Biden, but they would never vote for a far left extremist, and that's honestly more than, there might be one or two who are not far left extremists
but they're not getting a lot of support.
They're getting a lot of traction.
Elizabeth Warren seems to be rising in some of the polls, getting very close to Biden. All right, if you learn nothing else about the Democratic Party strategy in the 2020 elections by watching last week's debate, as Teresa did, you would know this. Gun issues will be a major part of the drive to win the White House, let me read this, and not hold the Senate, I have to take back the Senate, and hold the House of Representatives. That was written incorrectly, probably by me. The Kansas City area is well aware of gun issues and gun violence. Just last week, 5 homicides in a 24-hour span. 2 13-year-old Johnson County middle schoolers now face charges after taking guns to school. The gun issue is both local and national in scope. Let's start locally. What can the Kansas City, Missouri City Council do, if anything, to stop gun violence and the increasing rate of homicides? We'll start with Art and then go over to Ron.
First, a little constitutional context. When Justice Scalia wrote the Heller opinion that essentially kind of opened up this Second Amendment issue.
That's the decision that says gun rights
Are
individual
yes.
issues.
He wrote that this was done for defense by the individual, and that nothing in this opinion restricts reasonable regulation of the purchase and possession of guns. And since then, the Supreme Court has not once struck down any regulation of the purchase or possession of guns. And so Kansas City can, if the Missouri legislature would allow them to, prohibit the open display of guns or the carrying of guns or the possession of guns by persons under the age of 18. There's a fairly wide array of measures.
But the key point is Kansas City, Missouri can't do that on its own. It has to have approval from the state of Missouri, right?
I don't think so now. I think Jackson County or Kansas City could adopt ordinances, but I think
for years, like James said, they couldn't. They had to take state action.
I think within a blink, the state would shut them down. Yes. Yeah.
I think that typically the county or the city, if they are a charter city or charter county, have the ability to adopt the same as or stricter than what is at the state, but they can't adopt less than what is already in place at the state.
Well, there were a couple of ordinances passed by the city council a few weeks ago, but they dealt with teenagers, I think, and the ability of police to go in and seize weapons from teenagers. Well, Art, Ron, you're Ron.
It's 3 letters, monosyllabic. Yeah, we're good.
You're a work of art. You're a work of art, no doubt about it. Let me ask the same question to you. What, if anything, can the Kansas City Council do about gun violence and homicide?
Well, I think that's where the challenge is you've got an issue that everybody wants it to stop. We don't want to see people being shot. We don't want kids at school worrying about guns. But at the end of the day, there's a proliferation of guns on our streets. It's so incredible that what are you going to do? You can pass a law. Right now we have a law. You can't shoot someone. It's illegal. But they do it. I work with young kids, 17, 18 years old. If I ask them, I said, if I ask you to get a gun by Friday, could you do it? He goes, oh yeah, no problem. How do you curb that? What laws are being promoted? And I mean, Beto's going to come out and he's going to take everybody to AR-15 and AR-47. That would be an interesting.
Well, let me ask you about that, Alana. And this debate last week.
When you say Beto, you really mean Robert.
Yes. Thank you.
During the Democratic debate, he said, "Hell yes, we'll take away your AR-15s and AK-47s." And it seems to me that's something Republicans have said for years. Democrats just want to take your guns. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but doesn't that statement by O'Rourke give Republicans reason to run that quote in their campaign commercials?
Sure. I mean, of course it is.
He's done a favor for Republicans, has he not?
He does that pretty often, actually, right?
Keep talking.
I would like to say, though, until we realize the real problem in gun violence, it's going to continue to happen. If you look at the last the mass shootings, the 27 worst mass shootings in our history, 26 of those had fatherless homes. So until we look at what the real problem is, these things aren't going to change. You look at Europe, they have strict gun laws. They use knives. They have a high murder rate. So they'll just use another thing, whether they're bombs, whether they're, whatever it is.
You can't kill 50 people at a country western concert with a knife. And as a nation,
you can with a bomb.
As a nation, we have taken away machine guns. You can't buy a machine gun. As a nation, we took away AR-15s or semi-automatics, and it worked. The statistics of the number of mass shootings during that 10-year period when you could not own or possess an AR-15. What Beto O'Rourke did is he moved the window of acceptable discussion about restricting guns, and it's going to get there. A majority of Republicans, 51%, favor restricting the possession of semi-automatics, and 80% of Democrats.
I got to restrict any further conversation. Now it is time. This may happen. Roast and toast, where the Ruckheads have 30 seconds each to achieve, deceive, or leave. And we start with Art.
Greta Thunberg, and to all young people her age whose lives literally hang in the balance. If you're under 50 years of age now, you are very likely to see population destabilization worldwide because we have put as much atmospheric carbon into the air in the last 30 years as we had in the preceding 200, and the world's stability and its ability to promote life hangs in the balance.
Well, Ron, you and I won't have to worry. Go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. No, I think I'm going to roast Francis O'Rourke and his declaration
Beto.
because it's really playing to an emotional string.
Yes.
And it's stirring up a lot of stuff that's never going to be resolved because we haven't dealt with the root of it, which is the moral factor. We had machine guns in the 60s and the 50s and no school shootings.
Running short on time.
It's people.
Alana?
So.
I would like to roast the Democrat media for giving the information they did on the recent Kansas caucus. I think when you throw things out there without explaining what it is, it really causes a controversy and it causes more fighting that we just don't need.
Gives us something to talk about on Ruckus. Teresa, quickly.
Yes, I want to toast a new organization, Casey Common Good, and the Dunn family, specifically Terry and Peggy, for taking on the challenge of working to reduce violence, among other issues, and also kudos to my friend Classy Alcine for being named president of the organization.
All right, and finally, here is a toast to the Renaissance Festival in Bonner Springs, weekends through Columbus Day. I went a couple of weekends ago and I had my palms read. The palm reader said my palms revealed intelligence, talent, energy, leadership, and tremendous potential. Now, what did I do when she told me all that? Well, I gave her a hand.
Oh my goodness.
And that is Ruckus for this week. We're back next Thursday at 7. Now for the Ruckus and the crew, I'm Mike Shannon saying thanks for watching and good night.